War Master Drovan Kell of the Sithari Talon had killed 700 ships in his life, and he had never once seen the enemy move first. That was the law of the Talon. The strong arrived in a wall of iron, and the weak waited inside their walls to die. For 9,000 years the Sithari had crossed the dark in great slow battle lines, 60 dreadnoughts abreast, each one 4 kilometers of plated bone metal, and lesser races had looked up at that wall and understood the shape of the future. They surrendered, or they were cut down in good order. Drovan had cut down many. He had taken trophies from each, a plate from the hull, a name from the dead, hung in the long gallery of his flagship, the Gravewind, so that the slain could reckon his glory forever. He stood now on the command tier of the Gravewind and looked at the small blue world ahead, and he felt the old clean certainty in his chest. Earth, the records named it. A water world, soft, undefended in any way the Talon respected. No battle line, no fortress moons, just a planet that talked too much across the dark and had refused, 3 times, to send its tribute of ore and breeding stock to the Sithari throne. Refusal was a kind of gift. It meant trophies. "Range to the surface," Drovan said. 2 light minutes, War Master." The voice belonged to his scan master, a thin old Sithari named Osun, who had read the dark for him through 40 campaigns. "The world is loud. Many signals, many small heat sources in orbit and below, but no battle line, no capital hulls, nothing that matches our order of battle." "Then there is no battle," Drovan said, and the officers of the tier rumbled their agreement, a deep contented sound like stones settling. "Bring the wall to firing distance. We will take their cities in a single line and be home before the next moon." Drovan had read the file on Earth on the long crossing, the way he read the file on every world he was sent to break, and the file had told him this would be the easiest lesson of his career. The humans had no fleet worth the name. Their largest hulls were freighters and tugs and rescue boats, the soft little machines a soft little people built when no one had ever come to teach them fear. Their broadcasts were full of arguments, 10,000 voices disagreeing about everything, with no single throne to make them agree, which the file took as proof of weakness, because a people that cannot make itself agree cannot make itself a wall, and a people that cannot make a wall cannot stand against one. The file had a word for Earth. The word was unhardened. It meant a world that had never been visited by a wall, and therefore did not yet know the shape of the future. Drovan had broken 40 unhardened worlds in his life. They were the easy ones. They argued, and they wept, and they died in good order, and they filled the trophy haulers, and the dark grew a little more orderly for it. He had not noticed, in all his reading, the one line of the file that mattered, the line that said the humans had refused the Talon's demand 3 times. 40 unhardened worlds had been visited in his career, and not one of them had refused even once, because refusal was the act of a people who had decided they were not afraid, and an unhardened world was a world that did not yet know it was supposed to be afraid. Earth had refused 3 times. The file did not know what to make of that, so it had written it small, at the bottom, in the margin where unimportant things go, and Drovan had not read the margin, because War Masters do not read margins. The whole catastrophe that was about to unfold was written in that one unread line. A world that refuses 3 times is not unhardened. It is a world that has looked at the wall, and understood it perfectly, and decided to build the answer to it, and has simply not shown you the answer yet. He had brought 40 dreadnoughts, 40. It was an insult to use so many on a single soft world, but the throne had ordered a lesson made, and a lesson written in 40 hulls was a lesson no one forgot. Behind the dreadnoughts came the support shoal, 300 lesser warships, and behind those the trophy haulers, 80 empty barges waiting to be filled with ore and ash and the breeding stock of a beaten world. The Sithari did not bring small ships. The Sithari did not believe in small ships. A small ship was a confession of weakness, a thing a people built only when it could not build a great one. The smallest hull in Drovan's entire fleet was a 400-meter scout, and even that was an embarrassment he kept at the rear of the line. To the Sithari, size was not merely strength. Size was truth. The bigger hull was the more real hull, the more deserving hull, the hull the universe agreed should win, 9,000 years of broken walls had proven it. Drovan had never once in his life been given cause to doubt it. Austin had not looked away from his scan well. "War Master," he said, "the small heat sources, they are not staying still. They are aircraft, frightened ones." "No, War Master." The old scan master's voice had gone careful, the way it went only a few times in a life. "They are leaving the world. They are climbing out of the well. Thousands of them." Drovan crossed the tier to look. The scan well showed Earth as a blue disk, and around it, rising, were points of light. Not dozens, not hundreds. The well kept finding more, the count rolling upward faster than the old Sithari could read it aloud. And each point was tiny, each one a hull so small that by the law of the Talon, it was beneath notice. A gnat, a splinter, a thing that one dreadnought could swat with a fraction of one gun. There were a great many of them. "Count," Drovan ordered. Osun's reading claws moved over the well, climbing past 4,000, War Master. 6,000. The number is still rising. They are small, none larger than a courier, none armored to our standard, none showing a capital weapon. He paused, and the pause was the first thing on the tier that did not belong to a contented day. "But they are forming up. They are not fleeing. They are forming up around us." On the command tier of the Gravewind, the contented rumble had stopped. Drovan Kell looked at the cloud of climbing lights and felt, for the first time in 700 kills, something he had no trophy for and no word for in the proud tongue of the Sithari. He had built his whole life on the law that the strong came as a wall and the weak waited to die. He had never asked what would happen if the weak did not wait, and did not come as a wall, and did not care at all about the shape of the future he thought he was bringing. "Their largest hull," he said. "Find me their largest hull. Every fleet has a flagship. Find me the ship that gives the orders, and I will end this before it begins." Austin searched. The reading claws moved over the well, slow, then fast, then slow again, and the old scan master's silence stretched until Drovan turned to look at him. "There is no largest hull, War Master," Austin said. "They are all the same, every one of them, 900 tons, give or take. There is no flagship. There is no command hull. There is no wall and no center and no spine to cut. There are only the small ships, and they are all alike, and they all move at once. That is impossible. A fleet without a flagship is a fleet without a mind. You cannot coordinate 10,000 hulls with no center to give the orders." "I know the law, War Master," Austin said quietly. "I am telling you what the dark shows me. There is no center, and yet they move together. Watch." Drovan watched. The rising lights, by now past 8,000, were not milling like a frightened crowd. They were threading into the dark in long curving streams, and the streams bent and split and rejoined with a smoothness that no signal relay in the Talon could have managed. 10,000 small ships, flowing like a single body of water, like a thing that did not need a center, because every part of it already knew what every other part would do. It was beautiful. Drovan, who had spent his life admiring the slow grandeur of the wall, found it beautiful, and the beauty frightened him more than the count. The lights kept rising. The count went past 9,000. Ren Adley had been waiting for this morning for 3 years, and now that it had come she felt only the cold, flat calm she always felt before hard flying. She had been a crop duster pilot once, on the wheat colony where her grandmother had flown before her, banking a small fast machine low over the goldfields at dawn. When the first Sithari demand came, she had been 31 years old and had never thought about war in her life. When the third demand came, she was the senior flight instructor of an 11,000-ship swarm that did not officially exist, and she had spent 2 years teaching pilots a single reflex until it lived deeper in them than fear. Now the wall was here, all 40 hulls of it, sliding into the exact volume of space her people had spent 3 years learning to own, and she sat in her cockpit and watched it come, and she thought, with no triumph at all, only a kind of grim tenderness for the thing about to happen, "You read a file on us. You should have read the margin." And far below, on the blue world, a woman named Captain Ren Adley sat in a cramped cockpit barely larger than a coffin, watched 40 Sithari dreadnoughts slide into range exactly where her people had wanted them, and keyed her mic with a steady hand. "All hives," she said. "This is Hornet Actual." They came. They brought the whole wall, all 40 hulls, just like the models said they would. "They're looking for our flagship right now." A pause, and something almost like a smile in her voice. "Let's disappoint them. Light the swarm, and let's go to work." Below the dreadnoughts, the count of small lights did not stop. It would not stop for a long time. The Sithari had come to teach a soft world the shape of the future. 60 kilometers of bone metal in a perfect line. And the future had answered them in a voice they could not read, made of 9,000 small things that did not wait, and did not break, and had no center to cut, and were already moving inside the wall. To understand why Drovenkel had no word for what he was watching, you have to understand what the Sithari believed a war was. A war was a meeting of walls. Two battle lines arrived in the dark, faced one another, and traded fire across an agreed distance until one line broke. The broken line ran, and the running was the surrender, and the surrender was the war. The Sithari had perfected this over 9,000 years. Their dreadnoughts were the heaviest walls in their corner of the galaxy. No line had broken theirs in 600 years. They did not lose because losing required a line to break, and no one could break a line of 44-kilometer hulls. The whole law rested on one quiet assumption, so old the Sithari had forgotten it was an assumption at all. It assumed that the enemy would also bring a wall. Humanity had read the Sithari order of battle off 3 intercepted broadcasts and a captured trophy hall barge, and humanity had looked at the great slow wall and decided, with a kind of cheerful contempt that Droven would never have understood, not to bring one. The trophy hall barge was the thing that had taught them most. It had drifted into the edge of human space years before the first demand, a Sithari supply hull that had broken down and been abandoned, and humanity had towed it home and taken it apart bolt by bolt, and inside it they had found the whole mind of the Talon written in the way the ship was built. Every gun on that barge faced outward and forward. Every sensor was built to track a target at the long fixed range of a wall fight. Every door, every corridor, every weapon mount assumed an enemy that came at you in a line, from the front, at a distance you had agreed to in advance. There was not one system on the entire hull built to handle a thing that was already inside your formation, already behind you, already gone. The engineers who took the barge apart had stood in its gutted hull and understood, with a clarity that felt almost like pity, that the Sithari had built the most magnificent answer in the galaxy to a question nobody was going to ask them. They had spent 9,000 years perfecting the wall. They had never once spent a day imagining the swarm, because nothing in 9,000 years had ever forced them to. And a people that has never been forced to imagine its own defeat has no defense against the first mind that does the imagining for it. That was the gift the abandoned barge had given humanity. Not its guns, which were too big and too slow to be worth keeping, its blind spot, the vast, perfect, civilization-wide blind spot of a people who had only ever been the biggest thing in the dark. Captain Ren Adley flew a ship called a Hornet. It massed 900 tons. It was, by the standards of the Sithari Talon, beneath the dignity of a target. It carried one pilot, one heavy lance that could open a dreadnought's plating if it struck the same spot 4 times, and a drive built to do one thing the Sithari dreadnoughts could not do at all. It could change direction faster than a thought. A Sithari dreadnought turned the way a continent turns. It took 11 minutes to come about. Its guns were enormous and slow and built to reach across the agreed distance of a wall fight and smash another wall. They were not built to track a 900-ton splinter that was already past them, already behind them, already gone before the gun could finish swinging. The whole magnificent machine of the Talon was designed for an enemy that stood still at the proper range and let itself be hit. Ren's people did not stand still. They were the Holland Swarm Command, 11,000 Hornets, and 900 heavier ships called Drovers, and every one of them had been built around a single idea, so simple the Sithari had never bothered to defend against it. Do not face the wall. Get inside it. Once you are inside the wall's own guns cannot fire without hitting itself. There was a story humanity told about how the swarm had been chosen, and Wren had heard it from the woman who built the first Hornet, and it went like this. When the Sithari demand came the second time, the Council of Earth had argued for a year about what to build. The loud voices wanted a wall of their own, a fleet of great hulls to meet the Talon line for line, because that was what fleets were, and that was how you fought. And one quiet engineer, an old woman with grease under her claws, who had spent her life building crop skiffs and rescue boats, had stood up at the end of the year and said a thing that changed everything. She had said, "They have spent 9,000 years learning to beat a wall. If we build a wall, we will be fighting them on the one battlefield where they have never lost. So let us not build a wall. Let us build the one thing they have never had to fight, because they have always been the biggest thing in the dark. Let us build small. Let us build many. Let us build the swarm." And the council had listened, because the council was afraid, and fear sometimes makes people wise. So humanity built small and many, and it built them around a single rule that the Sithari would never have written into a war plan, because it was not about killing at all. The first contact of the battle lasted 4 seconds, and it told both sides everything. A flight of 9 Hornets, the leading edge of the swarm, came up out of the blue world's shadow and crossed the bow of the Stoneward at a speed the Dreadnought's gunners had never been asked to track. The Stoneward's forward batteries opened up, the way they had opened up on 100 broken walls, a barrage that would have gutted any battle line in the dark. The barrage went where a wall would have been. The Hornets were not a wall. They had already broken their flight into 9 separate lines the instant the guns moved, each one peeling a different way, so that the great fan of fire passed through the empty space where a wall would have hung, and touched nothing at all. By the time the Stoneward's gunners had registered that they had hit nothing, the 9 Hornets were behind them, where the Dreadnought had no guns, because the Dreadnought had been built to face the front, the way a wall faces the front, because a wall only ever fights what is in front of it. That was the whole war, right there, in 4 seconds. The Sithari fought what was in front of them. The humans made very sure never to be in front of them. Wren had drilled it into 11,000 pilots until it was no longer a tactic, but a reflex. Never present, never hold a line, never give the big guns a place to point. A Dreadnought's strength was a wall of fire across a fixed front, and the answer to a wall of fire was not better armor or a bigger gun. The answer was to simply not be there, to be already somewhere else, to treat the entire forward arc of a 4-kilometer warship as a room you walked around, rather than a wall you ran into. A Hornet that obeyed that one rule could not be hit by a Dreadnought any more than a fly could be caught by a slammed door. You had to be quick to slam a door on a fly, and the door had to know where the fly was going to be, and the door was 4 kilometers long and took 11 minutes to turn, and the fly could change its mind in less time than it took the door to notice it had a mind at all. "Hive 7, Hive 9, you've got the leading Dreadnought," Wren said into her mic, her voice level, her hands light on the stick. "Don't kill it, blind it. Take the scan masts and the gun directors and nothing else. We want them to keep their hull and lose their eyes." This was the part the Sithari could not have imagined, because it was the part that was not about killing. Humanity had studied the Talon long enough to know how it broke. It did not break when ships died. It broke when the wall stopped being able to see itself, when each Dreadnought lost track of the Dreadnought beside it, when 40 captains who had only ever fought as one wall suddenly each found themselves alone in the dark with 9,000 small fast things they could not track. The Sithari had no doctrine for fighting alone. They had never needed one. A single Dreadnought, cut off from the wall, was a 4-kilometer animal that had forgotten how to be afraid and was about to learn. On the Gravewind, the first reports came in, and they made no sense to Drovan Kell. "Warmaster, the lead Dreadnought Stoneward reports its scan masts are gone." "Gone how?" "Destroyed." "Cut, Warmaster. Lanced off clean. 4 small ships made 1 pass each pass shorter than a heartbeat, and the masts came away. The Stoneward is whole, its hull is whole, its guns are whole, but it cannot see. Its captain requests the wall's bearing. Drovan stared at the well. The dignity of his whole life told him this was impossible, that no splinter could do this, that the wall was the wall. But the Stoneward was the foremost ship of his line, the strongest hull he owned after his own, and it had just gone blind without taking a single mortal wound, and it was asking him where the rest of the wall was, because it could no longer see the ships flying beside it. "The wall's bearing is here," Drovan said. "Tell it to hold the line." "It cannot find the line, War Master. It cannot see the line. The small ships are between the hulls now. They are in the wall." That was the moment. If Drovan Kell had been a different kind of being, that he might have understood the true shape of the thing that had risen out of the blue world. The humans were not trying to destroy his fleet. Destroying 40 dreadnoughts would have taken days and cost them thousands of Hornets. They were doing something cheaper and far worse. They were taking the wall apart into 40 frightened animals, and then they were going to let those animals do the rest. Rin Adley brought her Hornet over the spine of the third dreadnought in the line, a hull the records named the Bitter March, 4 kilometers of bone metal sliding beneath her at a closing speed that would have smeared her across the cockpit if her drive had not caught the turn. She was so close she could see the trophy plates bolted along its flank, the hull names of 100 murdered ships, the long gallery of a War Master's pride. She did not slow to look. She put her lance through the Bitter March's forward gun director, a single clean shot, and pulled up and away before the dreadnought's gunners even knew which direction the splinter had come from. "Bitter March is deaf," she reported. "That's the front rank blinded. Hives 1 through 20. Peel off, go to the support shoal. Same rules. Eyes and directors only. Leave the hulls. I want 300 ships full of warriors who can't see the dark." There was a reason for the rule, and the reason was older than the war. Humanity had decided, in the long quiet council that built the Holland Swarm, that it did not want to kill the Sithari. Killing 40,000 crew across 40 dreadnoughts would have been easy enough, given time, and it would have made humanity into exactly the thing the Sithari already were, a wall that arrived and filled trophy haulers. The council had decided on something harder and stranger. It had decided to break the Talon's mind without breaking its body, to take a 9,000-year-old war machine and leave it whole, alive, full of living warriors, and utterly unable to fight, so that it would have to fly home and tell the throne what it had seen. A dead fleet teaches nothing. The dead do not report. But 40 blinded dreadnoughts, limping back through the dark with their guns intact and their pride in pieces, full of warriors who had watched a soft world refuse to play the only game they knew, that would teach the throne a lesson it could never bolt to a wall as a trophy. He knew only that his wall was coming apart, and that the small ships were everywhere, and that they were not killing his hulls. That last part disturbed him most of all. "Why do they not press the kill?" he said aloud. "To no one, to Osun, to the cold tear. They cut our eyes and they fly past. They could put 100 lances into the Stoneward's drive and end it. Why do they not end it?" Osun's reading claws had gone still. The old Scanmaster had read the dark for 40 campaigns, and he had learned, somewhere in those 40 years, to be honest even when honesty was a kind of treason. "Because they do not need to, War Master," he said quietly. "A thing they could end whenever they chose, and choose not to, is not afraid of us. They are not fighting us. They are sorting us. Sorting us. Like a keeper sorting a herd, War Master. The ones to blind, the ones to leave. They have a plan for each hull, and we are not in it as warriors. We are in it as a lesson to be delivered home." Drovan tried. Then, the thing every Sithari War Master had been trained to try when a line wavered. He ordered the wall to close up. "Tighten the ranks. Bring the hulls together. Present a single unbroken face of armor and guns, so dense that nothing could pass between." It was the move that had saved the Talon in 600 years of wall fights. When the enemy threatened to flank you, you made the wall thicker until there were no gaps to flank through. It was the worst possible thing he could have done, and the humans had known he would do it. When the dreadnoughts closed up, the gaps between them narrowed, and the narrowing did not keep the Hornets out. The Hornets were already inside. What the closing did was bring the great hulls so close together that now they truly could not fire without risking one another, and it packed the swarm's targets into a tighter, more convenient cluster, and it took 40 ships that might have scattered and run and locked them shoulder to shoulder where the humans could work through them like a row of fish in a barrel. Drovan had given the order that turned his wall from a fleet that might have fled into a fleet that had volunteered to hold still. "The wall is closing up, Hornet Actual," a hive leader reported, with something that was almost a laugh. "He's bunching them for us. He's doing the one thing we hoped he'd do." "Of course he is," Wren said quietly. "It's the only thing 9,000 years ever taught him to do. Don't gloat. He can't help it. Just work the cluster. Eyes and directors. Same as always." A new report came up from the lower tier, and the officer who gave it could barely keep the disbelief out of his voice. "War Master, the dreadnought Iron Vow attempted to ram. It saw a cluster of the small ships off its bow and put its drive to full and tried to crush them against open dark. The small ships were gone before the Iron Vow had finished giving the order. The Iron Vow is now turned out of the line, alone, 11 minutes from coming about, blind and surrounded." "They baited it," Austin said softly. "They showed it a target it could not resist and let it pull itself out of the wall. They are using our own strength as the rope. Every instinct that made us strong against a wall is a handle they pull to take us apart." Drovan Kell had taken 700 ships and never once seen the enemy move first. Now the enemy had moved first, last, and in every moment between, and he understood, slowly, the way a wall understands the thing that is taking it apart brick by brick, that he had brought 40 dreadnoughts into a place where 40 dreadnoughts did not matter, because the war he had come to fight was not the war that was happening. He looked again for the human flagship, the way a drowning being looks for the surface. Surely there was a center. Surely somewhere in that swarm was one hull a little larger than the rest, one mind giving the orders, one throat he could close to make it all stop. He had built his life on the truth that every fleet has a head, and to kill the head is to kill the fleet. There was no head. He searched for a full minute, and there was no head. 11,000 small ships, all alike, all moving as one, and not one of them more important than any other, so that there was nothing to cut, nothing to threaten, nothing to bargain with, no single death that would matter. The humans had built a fleet that could not be decapitated because it had no neck, and Drovan Kell, who had ended 700 fleets by finding the one hull that mattered, stood on the tier of the largest warship he had ever commanded, and understood that he was facing the first enemy in his life he did not know how to kill. Outside the hull of the Gravewind, the count of small lights had passed 11,000 and stopped, because that was all of them, and all of them was enough. They moved through the dying wall like a single thing made of many things, fast and patient and unbreakable, and they swarmed. The support shoal broke first, and it broke exactly the way Wren Adley had promised it would. 300 lesser Sithari warships had been holding their place behind the dreadnought line, waiting for the wall to do its work so the trophy haulers could move in. They were warships built to the same law as the dreadnoughts, only smaller, slow to turn, heavy in the nose, made to sit at the agreed distance and pour fire into a stationary foe. When 20 human hives came down on them and cut their gun directors and their scan masts in a single sweeping pass, the shoal did the only thing its doctrine allowed. It tried to form a line. It could not form a line. You cannot dress ranks against an enemy you cannot see, who is already behind you, who is between your ships, who fires once and is gone before your hull has finished turning toward where it used to be. The shoal captains called to one another for the wall's bearing and got back only static, and the bearing of ships that were no longer where they had been. Within 9 minutes the entire support shoal was a cloud of blinded hulls drifting apart in the dark, their guns full of charge, their crews unhurt, their warriors howling into instruments that told them nothing. And not one of them had been killed. There had been one bad moment, in the middle of the shoal work, that Wren would remember for the rest of her life. A young hive leader named Taro, flying Hive 63, had gotten too eager. The shoal warship he was blinding had a secondary battery the models had not mapped. A close defense ring meant for exactly this kind of small, fast threat, and when Taro came in for his pass, the ring opened up and caught his Hornet across the drive. For 3 seconds the whole channel went silent, 11,000 pilots holding their breath, because in 3 years of building the swarm and 1,000 war games they had told themselves the rule kept everyone safe, and now the rule had a hole in it and a young man's ship was tumbling. But the Hornet was small, and small ships are hard to kill even when you hit them, and Taro rode the tumble out, fought the drive back, and limped clear with a scorched flank and a steady voice. "Hive 63, still flying," he said, and the channel let its breath out all at once. Ren did not let it pass. "63, you broke the rule. You held in front of a hull you hadn't mapped, looking for a clean shot. The rule isn't there to be brave around. It's there so we all go home. Map the hull, take the eyes, never present. Say it back." And Taro said it back, chastened, and flew the rest of the day clean, and that was the only Sithari shot that came close to a human ship in the whole long afternoon, because the rule worked, and the rule was the whole point, and the one time someone bent it the dark reminded them why it was written. This was the thing that was breaking the Sithari, deeper than any wound. Ren had watched it happen in the war games 1,000 times before they ever launched, and she watched it happen now for real, and it was uglier and quieter than she had let herself imagine. A warrior race could die. It knew how to die. Dying in the wall, at the proper range, traded for the enemy's wall, was the most honored thing a Sithari could do, and the throne sang the names of those who did it. But there was no song for this. There was no song for being sorted. There was no honor in flying home whole, unbloodied, with your guns charged and your hull bright and your eyes cut off, to tell the throne that a soft blue world had taken your entire fleet apart and chosen, deliberately, not to bother killing you. That had no name in the proud tongue. The closest word the Sithari had was the word for an animal that had been spared by a larger animal because eating it was not worth the trouble. "Drover 3, move up," Ren said. "Bring the holders." The drovers were the heavier human ships, 900 of them, each one 10,000 tons, slower than the Hornets but still nimble next to a dreadnought. They did not carry lances, they carried holders, broad soft fields that wrapped a blinded hull and held it gently in place, the way a hand closes around a beetle without crushing it. As the Sithari shoal drifted apart, the drovers moved in among the blinded warships and took hold of them, one by one, and stopped them, and held them still in the dark. On the Gravewind, Osun read this aloud in a voice that had stopped pretending to be calm. "They are gathering the shoal, War Master, not destroying it, gathering it, holding each hull, 300 of our warships, taken and held, not one of them killed." "To what end?" Droven said. "If they do not take the crews, if they do not take the hulls, if they do not even take trophies, to what end do they hold them?" "I do not know, War Master. I have read the dark for 40 campaigns. I have never seen a fleet take an enemy and keep it whole. It is not done. The strong kill or enslave. They do not gather you up and hold you still and leave you breathing." There was a captain in the Sithari line named Voss, of the dreadnought Stonemarch, who had earned his tier in the breaking of 9 walls, and what happened to Voss happened to every captain in the fleet, and it is worth telling once, in full, because it is the true shape of the thing the humans did. Voss had spent 40 years learning to read a battle. He could look at a wall fight and know, in a glance, which line would break and when, the way a farmer reads weather. And in the last hour of his career he sat on the tier of the Stonemarch and could read nothing at all. The small ships came and went too fast for his eyes. His instruments, built to track a hull across 100,000 kilometers of fixed range, simply did not have words for a thing that crossed his entire firing arc in less than a second and then was inside his own formation. His gunners called out targets that were already gone by the time the words were finished. His scan master gave him bearings that were obsolete before they reached his ears. And then, very quietly, with no great blow, no explosion, no honorable wound, the Stonemarch's scan masts were cut away In a single pass he never even saw, and the battle simply went dark. Not the dark of a damaged ship. The dark of a ship that was perfectly whole and could no longer see. Voss sat on the tier of his undamaged dreadnought, every system green, every gun charged, 1,000 warriors alive and ready around him, and he was as helpless as a being can be, because helplessness, it turns out, is not about being wounded. It is about being whole and powerful and completely unable to use it, and there is no training in any war college in the dark for that, because no war college had ever imagined an enemy that would leave you whole on purpose. Drovan crossed to the great forward viewport, the one his predecessors had looked through at 100 broken walls, and he looked out at his fleet. He had brought 40 dreadnoughts and 300 warships into the dark to teach a lesson, and now the small things were everywhere among them, weaving between his hulls faster than his eyes could follow, and one by one his ships went dark and still and were taken, and through it all he could feel the thing that the humans were doing to him that was so much worse than killing. They were making him watch. A killed fleet does not have to watch itself die. The dead are spared the rest of the battle, but the Sithari were not being killed. They were being kept conscious, every captain at his post, every warrior whole, every eye that still had eyes forced to see the entire wall of the Talon come apart in the dark, and be carried off in human hands like a harvest. The humans wanted witnesses. They were building, out of 40 dreadnoughts and 300 warships, the largest single body of witnesses that had ever flown home to a throne, and every one of those witnesses would carry the same story, and the story would be true, and the throne would have to choose what to do with a truth it could not bury and could not avenge. Because how do you avenge a battle in which your enemy chose not to kill anyone? War Master. It was the Gun Master now, a younger Sithari. The rage in his voice barely held. The Grave Wind still has eyes. We are the only hull in the line that still sees. Give the order. Let me fire. We have 40,000 guns across the wall, and we have not loosed one. Let me fire into the swarm. Even blind, the other hulls can fire on my mark. It was the oldest answer the Talon had to any problem. When the wall is threatened, the wall fires. Drovan looked at the swarm, at the 11,000 small fast lights threaded through his fleet, and for one heartbeat the old certainty rose in him, the certainty of 700 kills, and he almost gave the order. Then he saw what firing would mean. The human ships were inside the wall. They were between his hulls. They flew so close to the Sithari dreadnoughts that to fire on them was to fire on his own line. 40,000 Sithari guns, loosed blind into a swarm woven through his own fleet, would not kill the humans. The humans were too fast and too close and too mixed in. The guns would kill the Talon. They would punch through the blinded dreadnoughts that could not see the shots coming, through the held warships of the shoal, through his own wall, and the humans would simply pull up and away and watch the Sithari finish what the swarm had started. The humans had not just gotten inside the wall, they had turned the wall's own guns into a thing that could only be used to commit suicide. No, Drovan said, and the word cost him more than any wound he had ever taken. Hold fire. War Master, we cannot simply let them. If we fire, we kill ourselves, and they fly home and tell the throne that the Talon destroyed its own fleet rather than be taken whole. Drovan's voice was very quiet now. They have thought of everything. They thought of it before they ever left their world. Every choice they have left us is a choice that serves their lesson. We cannot fight, because fighting kills us. We cannot flee, because the swarm is faster than any hull we own. We cannot even die well, because they will not let us die at all. He turned from the viewport. Tell me, Gun Master, in 9,000 years, has the Talon ever faced an enemy that planned the shape of our defeat down to the last gun, and then refused to fire the killing shot, because our survival was more useful to it than our death? The Gun Master had no answer. There was no answer in the proud tongue. He tried, though, because he was young, to find the one move that might still work, and he found the move every cornered wall eventually finds. The world, War Master, he said. The blue world itself. The small ships came from it. If we cannot fight the swarm, let us strike the well it climbed out of. We have 40,000 guns. Even blind, we can range a planet. It does not move. It does not dodge. Let us burn the cities the swarm rose to defend, and make the lesson ours after all. For one ugly heartbeat it hung in the air of the tier, the oldest cruelty of the wall, the thing the Talon did to worlds that refused it. Burn what cannot dodge. And then Osun spoke, and his voice was very tired. They thought of that too, the old Scanmaster said. Look at the well, Gunmaster. Look at what is between us and the cities. The Gunmaster looked. Between the Sithari fleet and the Blue World hung a layer of the swarm. Thousands of Hornets the humans had never committed to the fight, holding station in a wide, patient shell around their planet, every one of them facing outward, every one of them waiting. They had not joined the work on the wall, because they had a different work. The instant a single Sithari gun ranged the surface, those Hornets would be inside the firing solution, weaving through the path of every shell, so that to fire on the cities was, once again, to fire into a swarm that was faster and closer than the shell, and the shell would never reach the ground, and the gun that fired it would simply have told 11,000 patient pilots that its crew had chosen to be the kind of thing that burned cities, and the humans would have stopped being gentle. They left a wall of their own around the world, Osun said softly. The only wall they built, not to stop our hulls, to stop our shells. They knew we would reach for the planet when we could not reach for the swarm, and they put a shell of themselves between us and the children. We cannot even commit the one atrocity left to us. They have closed that door too. The Gunmaster sat down slowly at his station and did not speak again. A long silence held the tier. Then the Gunmaster tried once more, because he was young, and because the young cannot believe a wall can fail. The scout, War Master. The 400-meter scout at the rear of the line. It is small. It is fast for one of ours. Let it run for the dark, and carry word to the throne. If we cannot win, let us at least not be the ones who tell the story. Let it be a Sithari mouth, not a human one. Drovan considered it for the length of a breath. Then a report came up from the lower tier, and it answered the question for him. The scout is taken, War Master. 3 of the small ships matched its course before it had cleared the line. They did not fire on it. They flew alongside it, one to each flank and one above, and they held station, and the scout captain understood that the moment he went to full drive they would cut him, and so he did not go to full drive. He is flying with them now. They are escorting him back into the fleet. He reports that the small ships have not threatened him in any way. They have simply made it clear that he is not permitted to leave, and that they will be gentle about it, and that being gentle does not mean letting go. They thought of the scout too, Osun said. Of course they did. They have read us for years. They knew we would reach for the smallest, fastest hull and try to run a messenger home. They want the message carried, but they want it carried by the whole fleet, in person, not whispered ahead by a frightened scout. They will not let one of us tell the story. They will make all of us tell it, together, and they will make sure it is the true one. Drovan Kell looked at the swarm and understood the trap in its fullness for the first time. It was not a battle he could lose. It was not a battle he could win. It was not even a battle. It was a sentence, and the humans had written every line of it before he ever arrived, and his only remaining choice was how he carried it home. Out in the dark, Wren Adley flew the long axis of the human swarm, watching her hives finish the support shoal, watching the drovers gather the blinded hulls, and she felt no joy in it, only the heavy, steady focus of a person doing difficult work carefully. Her grandmother had flown crop dusters over the wheat plains of a colony world. Her mother had flown rescue skiffs into burning orbital habitats. Wren had been raised on the idea that the small, fast machine was not a lesser thing than the great slow one, that 1,000 small hands could lift what no single great hand could, and that the measure of a people was not the size of the wall they could build, but the things they chose to do when they had the strength to do anything at all. Humanity had built the Holland swarm because a wall had come 3 times and demanded its children and its ore, and humanity had decided that it would answer the wall, and that the answer would be remembered, but it had also decided what kind of answer it would be. Not a slaughter, not a wall of its own, something the Sithari had no word for, because the Sithari had never imagined that strength and mercy could be the same gesture. A young pilot's voice came over the channel, one of the hives that had just finished blinding the last warship of the shoal. He was breathing hard, the way you breathe after the hardest flying of your life. Hornet Actual, this is Hive 41. We've got the whole shoal held. 300 hulls. Nobody dead on either side. I keep waiting to feel like we won, and I don't feel anything. Is that wrong? It's not wrong, Ren said. Killing feels like winning, right up until you have to live with it. We chose the harder thing on purpose. You're not supposed to feel a rush. You're supposed to feel like you did something careful and right and hard. Hold that. It's worth more than the rush. Now form up. We've got the deep dreadnoughts left, and then we've got the flagship, and the War Master is going to watch every bit of it. Hornet Actual to all hives, she said, and her voice steadied into the flat calm her people had learned to trust. Front ranks blind. Shoals gathered. Scouts back in the box. Move to the deep dreadnoughts. You know the rule. Eyes and directors. Leave the hulls. Leave the crews. A pause. And leave the flagship for last. I want the War Master to watch his whole fleet go before we come for his eyes. He came here to teach. Let's make sure he learns the lesson all the way to the end. The deep dreadnoughts went one by one, and Drovan Kell watched every one. These were the great hulls of the rear ranks, the heaviest in the wall after the Gravewind, named in the long honor roll of the Talon. The Iron Vow, the Stone March, the Last Tribute, the Deep Keel and the Bloodright and the Thousand Walls, each one 4 kilometers of bone metal, each one carrying 1,000 warriors, each one the pride of a captain who had earned his tier across a lifetime of broken walls. And one by one the human hives came down on them, 4 ships to a dreadnought, 1 clean pass each, and cut the scan masts and the gun directors and pulled away, and one by one the great hulls went blind and still and were taken up gently in the holders of the drovers and stopped in the dark. Not a single dreadnought was destroyed, not a single Sithari warrior was killed, and that was the wound that would not close. Some of the captains fought. Of course they fought. They were Sithari, and the wall was in their blood, and they could not simply stand and be blinded. The captain of the Bloodright saw the 4 small ships coming and turned every gun he could bring to bear and filled the dark ahead of him with a wall of fire, the proudest barrage of his life, 10,000 rounds in 9 seconds, enough to shred a battle line. The small ships were not in front of him. They were already past him, already above him, already gone, and the great barrage tore off into empty dark and hit nothing at all. And when it was finished, the Bloodright's scan masts were gone, and its gun directors were gone, and it had spent its fury on the void, and had nothing left but the silence after. The humans had not even troubled to dodge. They had simply never been where the guns were pointed, because the guns were built to point at a wall, and there was no wall. There had never been a wall. There was only the swarm. The captain of the 1,000 Walls tried something cleverer. He held his fire and waited, hoping to catch a hive on its pass, to time 1 shot for the half-second a small ship would be close and level. He waited through 3 passes, holding, the discipline of a lifetime in his trigger claw, and on the 4th pass he fired, 1 shot, perfectly timed, exactly where a human ship would be. And the human ship was not there, because the human pilot had seen the gun hold its fire through 3 passes, and had understood, in the way these humans seemed to understand everything, that a held gun meant a trap, and had changed her line by a hand's width at the last instant, and the perfect shot went through the place she had been and into the dark, and the 1,000 Walls went blind like all the rest. You could not outweight them. You could not outthink them. They had been thinking about this fight for longer than the Sithari had known the blue world existed. There was a moment, near the end, when 6 of the deep dreadnoughts tried the last thing the Talon had never tried, because the Talon had never needed to. They tried to fight as small ships. The captains of the Deep Keel and 5 of her sisters, seeing that the wall had failed, broke formation on purpose, scattered, and tried to turn and chase the Hornets one-on-one, hull against hull, the way the small fast things did it. It was the bravest thing Drovan saw all day, and it was the most hopeless. A 4-kilometer dreadnought trying to dogfight a 900-ton Hornet was a fortress trying to swat a sparrow. The deep keel hauled itself through a great laboring turn that took 11 minutes, and at the end of the 11 minutes, the Hornet it had been turning toward was simply not there, had not been there for 10.5 of those minutes, was already across the dark, cutting the eyes off another hull. You cannot learn in an afternoon what a people spends 3 years building its entire civilization around. The 6 brave dreadnoughts blundered through the dark chasing ghosts until their eyes were cut like all the rest, and the bravery bought them nothing, and somewhere in watching it, Drovan understood that there had never been a move. From the first instant the swarm rose out of the well, there had never once been a move that won, or even a move that delayed. The humans had not beaten his plan. They had built a war in which his entire civilization did not have a plan, and could not make one, because every instinct it owned was an instinct for fighting a wall, and there was no wall, and there never would be again. Drovan had spent his life believing that the worst thing one fleet could do to another was to destroy it. He had been wrong. The worst thing one fleet could do to another was to prove, beyond any argument, that it could destroy it whenever it liked, and then decline, and gather it up whole, and carry it home to its own throne as a living message. The dead could be mourned and avenged and sung. The Talon knew what to do with the honored dead, but the Talon had no right, no song, no word, for 40 dreadnoughts that came home unbloodied and untaken and utterly defeated, with every gun charged and every warrior breathing, to lay before the throne the truth that the wall did not work anymore, and never would again. "The blood right is taken, War Master," Austin said. "The 1,000 walls is taken. The deep keel is taken. They hold 39 of our 40 dreadnoughts now. We are the only hull in the wall that still has its eyes." "And the swarm?" "Around us, War Master, all of it. 11,000 small ships and 900 holders. They have stopped moving. They are simply waiting. They have left us our eyes so that we may see them waiting." Drovan Kell stood on the command tier of the Gravewind, the last seeing ship of the Sithari Talon, and looked out at the largest swarm of warships any Sithari had ever beheld, every one of them small enough to ignore, all of them together a thing that had taken his entire fleet apart in under an hour without a single death, and he understood at last what the humans had built, and why. They had built a mirror. For 9,000 years the Sithari had arrived at soft worlds and shown those worlds the shape of overwhelming strength, the wall that could not be broken, the future that could not be refused, and the humans had taken that exact lesson and learned it perfectly and then handed it back, turned inside out. "Here is overwhelming strength," the swarm said, without saying anything at all. "Here is a force you cannot break, cannot flee, cannot even die against. Here is the future, and it cannot be refused. Now feel what every world you ever visited felt when your wall slid over its sky. Feel it whole. Feel it breathing. We will not let you off into death. You will carry this feeling home, all 40 hulls of it, and you will give it to your throne, because you brought it here, and now it is yours." A light bloomed on the tier, a single channel opening. The humans were hailing the Gravewind. Before he answered the hail, Drovan Kell did one last thing, the thing a war master does when everything else has failed. He spoke to his own fleet, to all 39 blinded hulls, on the deep command band that the humans, he was certain, were listening to. He told the truth, because there was nothing left to defend. "Talon, this is the Gravewind. We are beaten, not bloodied. Beaten. I have watched the whole wall taken apart, and I have no order to give you that will change it. I will not spend your lives on a barrage that kills only ourselves. I will not burn a world we cannot reach. When the small ships let us go, and I believe they will, we will fly home, and we will tell the throne the truth, every captain of us, in one voice, so that no throne can call it the failure of one war master and try the wall again. That is my last order. Survive, and remember, and tell it true." It was not a war master's order. It was something else, something that had no name in the Talon yet, the first order in 9,000 years that asked its warriors not to die, but to carry, and across 39 blinded hulls the captains heard it, and understood it, and the silence on the command band was the sound of a civilization beginning, very slowly, to change its mind. "They wish to speak, War Master," the signal master said. Drovan could have refused. A Sithari War Master did not parley with splinters, but there was no wall left to keep his dignity behind, and he found, to his own surprise, that he wanted to hear the voice of the thing that had unmade him. "Open it," he said. The voice that came through was a woman's, level and tired, and entirely without triumph. "War Master Drovan Kell, of the Sithari Talon," Ren Adley said. "This is Captain Ren Adley, of the Holland Swarm Command. I'm the one who's been flying past your hulls all afternoon. I'd like to talk to you about how this ends, because it ends in about 10 minutes either way, and I'd rather it ended with you understanding it." "You have taken my fleet," Drovan said. 39 hulls. You leave me one. I am to understand that this is mercy." "It's not mercy," Ren said. "Mercy would be letting you go home pretending this didn't happen. This is the opposite of that. I'm going to make sure you remember every second of it." There was no cruelty in her voice. It was the voice of someone explaining a hard thing plainly. "Your people came to our world 3 times and demanded our children and our ore, and the 3rd time you brought 40 dreadnoughts to make a lesson of us. We decided to let you make your lesson. We just decided to write the ending. Then write it. Cut my eyes as you cut the others. Take the grave wind. Be done." "No," Ren said. "I'm not going to take the grave wind. I'm going to leave you your eyes, and your guns, and your hull, and I'm going to leave you your fleet, all 39 of the dreadnoughts, and all 300 of the shoal, every ship and every warrior, alive and whole and blind, and then I'm going to let you fly all of them home." On the command tier, the gunmaster made a sound of disbelief. Drovan held up a claw for silence. "You will give the fleet back," he said slowly. "Blinded, but whole. 40,000 warriors. The entire Talon battle force. You will simply let it go." "I will," Ren said. "Because a dead fleet teaches the throne nothing. The dead don't report, but 40 hulls limping home with their guns charged and their eyes cut off, full of warriors who watched a soft blue world take them apart and choose not to kill them. That's a lesson the throne can't bury, and can't avenge, and can't sing into something it isn't. You came to teach us the shape of the future, War Master. We're sending the future home with you. We just want to be very sure you carry it the whole way." Drovan Kell was silent for a long moment. Around the grave wind, 11,000 small lights hung in the dark and waited. "Why did you not simply build a wall of your own?" he asked, and the question surprised even him, because it was not a War Master's question. It was the question of a being who had glimpsed, too late, a different way the universe could have been. "You have the skill, you have the will. You could have built dreadnoughts to meet ours, hull for hull, and fought us as the law demands. Why this? Why 10,000 splinters and a rule against killing?" The woman was quiet a moment, and when she answered, her voice had changed, gone deeper, as if she were saying a thing her whole people believed. "Because if we'd built a wall," Ren said, "we'd have had to become you to use it. A wall only knows how to do one thing. It arrives, and it demands, and it fills its trophy haulers, and it tells itself that bigger means right. We watched you do that to 100 worlds. We read their names off your hull, and we decided we'd rather lose than win that way." A pause. "So we built something that could beat the wall without becoming it. Something small enough that no single one of us could ever be a tyrant, and many enough that no tyrant could ever command us all, and built around a rule we put in before we put in a single gun, that we would break the thing that came to break us, and we would not kill it, because killing it would have made us into it. That's why, War Master, we didn't want your fleet. We wanted to still be ourselves after we beat it." Drovan Kell understood then that he had been defeated not by a better wall, but by a people who had looked at the wall and refused it, and had found, in that refusal, a strength his entire civilization had never imagined existed. "You understand what you are doing," he said at last, and it was not a question. "You are not sparing us out of weakness, or even only out of kindness. You are sparing us because our survival is a weapon you can aim at our throne, and our deaths are not. You have weighed our lives against your purpose and found us more useful breathing." A low, strange sound came from him, the Sithari sound that was not quite a laugh. "The throne sent me to teach a soft world hardness, and the soft world has outthought the Talon so completely that it spends our very lives more coldly than we ever did, and calls it mercy, and is right to." "I never called it mercy," Ren said gently. "You did, but you're right about the rest." A pause. "There's one more thing, War Master, and then you can take your fleet home." "Speak it." "The trophy plates, the hull names bolted along your flank, the 100 dead ships you carry as glory." Her voice did not change, but something underneath it did. "We read every name off your hull while we worked. 100 ships you killed and kept as decoration. We know who they were now. We've added them to the list of worlds your wall visited, and we're sending that list home with you too, riveted to the inside of every hull where your warriors can't help but read it. Every name you took, so that when the throne asks what happened out here, the answer is already written on the walls of your own fleet, in the names of everyone the Talon ever called beneath its notice." "And one more thing after that, War Master," Ren said, and now her voice was quiet in a different way, almost gentle. "We won't put one of those plates on our own hulls, not one. We could. We've earned 100 of them today, by your law. 40 dreadnoughts and 300 warships taken whole, the greatest haul any fleet ever brought home. And by the law of the Talon, we have the right to bolt your names along our flanks and fly them forever. We're not going to, because the day we start hanging trophies is the day we've become the thing we beat, and the whole point of all of this, the whole point of building small and many and refusing to kill, was so that we could win and still not become you. So we'll fly home with bare hulls, War Master. No names, no glory bolted to the outside where everyone can see. Just 11,000 small ships that did a hard thing carefully and then went home and folded back into the fields. That's the difference between us. You needed the galaxy to see your kills. We need to be able to live with ourselves after them. It turns out that's the stronger of the two." Drovan Kell looked, slowly, at the long gallery of trophy plates that ran the length of his command tier, the pride of 700 kills, and for the first time in his life he could not meet the names. He thought of the human hulls flying home bare, carrying nothing, claiming nothing, and he understood that he had spent his entire life believing that a trophy was a sign of strength, and that he had been wrong about that too, the way he had been wrong about everything since the small lights began to rise out of the well. A trophy was a thing you needed when your strength was the only thing you had. The humans did not need them, because the humans had something the Talon had never owned in 9,000 years, and did not even have a word for. They were able to be strong and to stop, in the same breath, by choice, and to walk away from a beaten enemy carrying nothing at all, because the walking away was the strength, and the empty hull was the trophy, and only a people who understood that could ever truly have won. The drovers released the blinded fleet at the edge of the system, one hull at a time, and turned them all toward home. It took the better part of a day. 11,000 Hornets and 900 drovers moved through the gathered Sithari fleet with a patience that frightened Drovan more than any weapon, escorting each blinded dreadnought and each held warship out of the human swarm and pointing it back along the road it had come, the long dark road to the Sithari throne. The humans did not crow. They did not fire a parting shot. They simply did the work of releasing 40,000 enemy warriors with the calm care of people putting tools back where they belonged, and then they pulled back from the dreadnoughts and let the great blind hulls feel their slow way home. Before the last drover let go of the Gravewind, Ren Adley opened the channel one final time, and she did a thing the Sithari had not expected, a thing that stayed with Drovan longer than any of the rest. "War Master," she said, "we left your gunnery whole on purpose, every one of your 40,000 guns, fully charged. You could turn back right now and try us again. We won't stop you from trying. I want you to know that, flying home. Not that you couldn't win, that you could turn around and try, and we'd just do this again, gently, all afternoon, as many times as you want. The doors open behind you the whole way. That's the part I want you to carry. We're not keeping you from coming back. We're letting you choose not to." And then the holder released, and the grave wind was free, and free was the cruelest thing she could have given him, because a chained being can tell itself it would have fought on if only it were free. A free being who turns for home has no such comfort. Drovan Kell turned for home a free fleet, by his own choice, and he knew it, and the knowing flew with him. Drovan kept his eyes the whole way, because the humans had left them to him on purpose, and so he watched. He watched his fleet fly home defeated, without a single death. He watched the dreadnoughts that could not see the stars feel their way through the dark, by old dead reckoning, 44-kilometer animals that had forgotten how to be anything but a wall, creeping home one careful jump at a time. He watched his warriors at their useless guns, charged and ready and aimed at nothing, because there was nothing left to aim at, and there never had been. And he watched, on the inner walls of the Gravewind where the humans had riveted their list, the names scroll past, the 100 ships of his gallery and the worlds behind them, every name the Talon had ever taken and called beneath its notice, written now where his warriors could not look away. There was a long while, somewhere in the middle of that journey home, when Drovan Kell did the thing the humans had given him the freedom to do. He sat alone on the command tier in the small hours of the watch, and he looked at his 40,000 charged guns, and he thought about turning the fleet around. He could feel the old certainty trying to rise, the certainty of 700 kills, the voice of 9,000 years that said a wall does not accept defeat, a wall returns, a wall tries again until it breaks the enemy or breaks itself. He sat with that voice for a long time, and then he understood why the humans had left the door open, why they had made so very sure he knew he was free to come back. They had not been merciful, they had been precise. They had handed him the choice, so that the defeat would be his and not theirs, so that he could not tell the throne the wall had been beaten by force, only that it had been beaten so completely that its own war master, free, armed, and able to try again, had looked at the blue world and chosen not to. There is no song for that either. He did not turn the fleet around. He flew it home, and every league of the way he knew that flying it home had been his own free choice, and that was the lesson, and it was riveted into him deeper than any plate. It is one thing to be defeated. The Talon understood defeat, in its way, as the breaking of a wall. It is another thing entirely to be defeated, and spared, and sent home as a message, to carry your own conqueror's lesson in your own hull, to know that you are alive only because your enemy decided your life was worth more than your death. There is a particular kind of silence that fills a warrior who learns this. Drovan Kell flew home inside that silence, and so did 40,000 of his kind, and the silence got into the bone metal of the fleet and never came out. Old Asun, who had read the dark for 40 campaigns, came to the command tier on the last night of the journey, and stood beside his war master for a while without speaking. He was very old, and he had seen the wall win 700 times, and he had never thought to see it lose, and now that he had, he found he was not as grieved as he had expected to be. When at last he spoke, it was quietly, the way he had told the truth all through the battle. "I have been thinking, War Master, about what we will tell the throne," Asun said, "and I have decided that I will tell it the truth, all of it. Not the truth that saves our honor, the other one. That a people smaller than us in every way that we have ever measured looked at the largest fleet in our corner of the dark and were not afraid, and took it apart in an afternoon, and gave it back, and that they could have killed us all and chose not to, and that the choosing was the most powerful thing I have ever seen a fleet do." He was silent a moment. "I think the throne should hear that from someone who admired it. I think someone should say, out loud, in the throne hall, that the blue world was right, and we were wrong, and that the wall was never strength at all. Someone old enough that they cannot punish him by taking his future, because he has none left. I would like that to be me." Drovan Kell looked at his old scan master for a long time. "It will cost you everything," he said. "It cost the blue world nothing to spare us," Asun said, "and they did the harder thing anyway. I can afford to tell the truth. I have only a name to lose, and I would rather lose it telling the truth than keep it telling a lie that gets 10,000 more worlds visited by the wall. He looked out at the dark. They taught me that, War Master. The small, fast ones. I did not want to learn it, but I am old, and I have stopped being able to pretend I did not see what I saw. When the Talon reached the throne did exactly what Ren Adley had known it would do, because the throne too only knew one game. It demanded to know how many human ships the fleet had destroyed. The answer was none. It demanded to know how many human hulls had fallen to the wall. The answer was none. It demanded the trophy plates, the proof of glory, the names of the slain, and the War Master Drovan Kell laid before the throne instead the list the humans had riveted to his hull, the 100 ships of his old gallery, and the worlds behind them. And old Ossen stood up in the great hall, in front of the throne and the whole assembled order of the Talon, and told the truth, all of it, the truth that did not save their honor, and the silence that had flown home with the fleet, filled the throne hall too, and did not leave. The throne could not avenge the battle, because no one had died in it. The throne could not bury the battle, because 40,000 warriors had seen it. The throne could not sing the battle into glory, because there was no glory in being gathered up whole and handed back. The throne could not even rebuild the wall and try again, because the wall was the thing that had failed. The wall was the thing the soft blue world had taken apart in under an hour, and every warrior who had flown home knew it, and a wall that its own warriors have stopped believing in is no longer a wall at all. There is a thing that happens to a story like this, and the humans had counted on it, and it happened exactly as they had counted. The Talon was not the only wall in that corner of the dark. There were other empires, other thrones, other slow, proud fleets that crossed the void demanding tribute from soft worlds, and they all watched one another, the way predators watch one another, for any sign of weakness. When the Talon came home from the blue world with 40 hulls whole and unbloodied and beaten, the other thrones heard of it, the way thrones always hear of these things, and at first they laughed, because a fleet that came home without a single casualty had clearly simply turned and fled, and a throne that flees is a throne ripe for the taking. So one of the other empires, a wall people called the Koran, who had long eyed the Talon's territory, gathered its own battle line and went to test the blue world for itself, certain that whatever had frightened the soft old Talon would be no trouble for the bold young Koran. The Koran came home the same way, whole, unbloodied, beaten, their guns charged and their eyes cut, and a riveted list of names on the inside of every hull, and after that the laughing stopped all across that corner of the dark, because 2 of the proudest walls in the region had gone to a single soft blue world and come home alive and ruined, and no throne could pretend any longer that it was a fluke, or a flight, or the failure of one old war master. There was a thing out there, under that blue sky, that took walls apart and sent them home to tell about it, and it could not be raided, could not be decapitated, could not be starved or scattered or burned, and the only way to be sure of never meeting it was to never go. So they never went, not the Talon, not the Koran, not any of the slow, proud thrones that had spent 10,000 years arriving as walls. The blue world had not built a fleet that could win a war. It had built a fleet that made the wars stop being worth starting, and that, the humans had understood from the very first council, was the only victory that did not have to be won twice. The Sithari Talon never came to Earth a 4th time. It never came to any soft world again. The great slow battle line stayed home, and the throne turned its eyes inward, and the long gallery tradition quietly ended, because no war master could look at a trophy plate anymore without thinking of the list riveted to the grave wind, and the soft blue world that had read every name. In time, the records say, the Sithari took the trophy plates down from all their hulls, every one, across the whole fleet, and that was the beginning of something in them that had no name yet either, but was not the wall, and was better than the wall. There was one more thing the humans did, in the years after, that the thrones never understood, because it was the kind of thing only a people who had refused the wall would ever think to do. They sent the names home, not just riveted to the hulls of the beaten fleet, but properly, deliberately, in the long, quiet decades that followed. Humanity took the list they had read off the Gravewind's trophy plates, the 100 murdered ships, and the worlds behind them, and they tracked down what was left of those worlds, the broken and tributary and half-forgotten peoples the Talon had visited as a wall, and they gave each one back its names. They sent ships, small fast ones, unarmed, carrying nothing but the record of who had been lost, so that a people the Talon had emptied could at least know, at last, the names of the ships that had died defending them, and could grieve them properly, and could stop being only a margin in someone else's file. It cost the humans a great deal, and won them nothing the thrones could measure. But the ruled worlds remembered it, and the remembering was its own kind of fleet, slower than the swarm, and far more patient, and in the long centuries it did more to end the age of walls than any number of cut scan masts. You cannot rule as a wall over peoples who have had their names given back to them. They have remembered that they were someone before you arrived, and a people who remembers that is a people you can no longer convince to wait inside its walls to die. Captain Wren Adley flew her Hornet back down through Earth's atmosphere as the last of the drovers were stowing for refit, and she landed in a wide cold field under a gray sky and climbed out of the cockpit that was barely larger than a coffin, and stood for a while in the wind, not feeling much of anything, the way you do not feel much of anything right after the hardest work of your life is finished. Her people gathered around her, the pilots of the hives, 11,000 of them across the whole frontier, linked by 100 channels, and they did not cheer either. They had not killed anyone. There was nothing to cheer. They had done something stranger and harder than killing. They had taken the most fearsome wall in their corner of the galaxy and proven, gently and completely, that it did not matter, and they had sent it home to teach that lesson to the only audience that needed to learn it, and they had not had to become the Sithari to do it. Did it work? The young pilot of Hive 41 asked her, over the channel, "Will they come back?" Wren looked up at the gray sky, where 40 dreadnoughts had hung that morning, and would never hang again. "They won't come back," she said. "Not because we scared them. Anyone can scare a fleet for a season. They won't come back because every single one of those warriors flew home knowing exactly what we are now, and exactly what we chose not to do, and there's no wall in the galaxy thick enough to keep that knowledge out." She pulled off her flight gloves. "We didn't beat their fleet. We beat the idea that built it. That's the only kind of winning that lasts." "And if some other wall comes," the young pilot said, "some other empire, bigger than the Talon, what then?" "Then we go up again," Wren said, "all of us, small and many and fast, and we take it apart, and we send it home alive, and we let it tell the others." She looked at the long, cold field where the Hornets sat folded and waiting, 11,000 of them, small enough that no one of them could ever be a tyrant, many enough that no tyrant could ever command them all. That's what the swarm is for. Not to win one war, to be the thing the walls find out about, the answer that's always waiting under the blue sky, so they stop coming. We're not a fleet, we're a fact, and the dark learns facts slowly, but it learns them. The young pilot was quiet for a while, the way the young go quiet when they have just understood something that will stay with them for life. Then he asked the last question, the one Wren had been waiting for, because every good pilot asked it eventually. "How did we know it would work? Before today? Before we ever flew? How did anyone know the swarm would beat the wall and not just die against it?" "We didn't know," Wren said. "That's the part nobody tells you. We hoped. We ran the models 10,000 times and they said it should work, but a model is not the dark, and the first time you fly the real thing against 40 real dreadnoughts, all you have is the hope and the hours you put in." She watched the long cold field where the Hornets sat folded and waiting. Here is the thing about the wall, the thing they never understood about themselves. The wall is certain. It has been the biggest thing in the dark for 9,000 years, and it has forgotten how to be anything else. And certainty makes you slow, and slow is the one thing a wall cannot afford against a swarm. We were never certain. We were 100 small frightened crews who hoped a careful plan would hold. And it turns out that a people that has to hope and plan and be careful and check its own work will outfly a people that is simply certain, every single time. Our doubt was the engine, Their certainty was the cage. They walked into the dark sure they had already won, and we walked into the dark afraid we might lose, and the fear made us better, the way fear has always made us better, all the way back to the wheat fields and the rescue boats. She pulled off her flight gloves at last. Don't ever let anyone make us certain, 41. The day the swarm is certain is the day it becomes the wall. Stay afraid, stay careful, stay small. That's the whole secret. That's the only secret there ever was. And the young pilot understood, and so did 11,000 others listening on the channel, and the understanding folded down into the swarm and stayed there, passed pilot to pilot through all the long years that followed, the one law beneath all the others. Stay afraid, stay careful, stay small, and you will never become the thing you rose to beat. A long way off, in the dark, the Sci-Fi Talon crept home blind, 40 hulls full of breathing warriors and one riveted list of names, and behind it the blue world that had refused 3 times turned quietly under its gray sky, 11,000 small fast ships folding back down into their fields and hangars and cold wide plains, waiting, the way a hive waits, patient and whole and entirely unafraid. War Master Drovan Kell of the Sci-Fi Talon had killed 700 ships in his life, and never once seen the enemy move first. He lived a long time after the Blue World, longer than he wanted to, and in all those years he never took another trophy, and never built another wall, and never found the word for what had happened to him in the dark above Earth. There was no word for it in the proud tongue. There never had been. The Sci-Fi had spent 9,000 years arriving as a wall and watching the weak wait inside their walls to die, and it had never once occurred to a single one of them to ask the only question that mattered, the question a soft blue world had answered for them in an afternoon, with 11,000 small fast hands and not a single death. What happens, the swarm had asked, the way a swarm asks, with its whole body and no words at all, when the weak do not wait? Drovan Kell knew the answer now. He carried it home riveted to his hull, and he carried it the rest of his life, and when at last he died, old and quiet and far from any wall, the last thing he understood was that the soft world had been right to spare him. His death would have taught the throne nothing. His long life had taught it everything. The humans had read even that, all the way to the end, and spent it more wisely than he ever could have, and called it nothing at all, because to them it had simply been the work, done carefully and finished, and set back where it belonged. The swarm went quiet over the blue world, and the wall never came again, and that was the whole of the lesson, written in the only language a wall could finally understand, by the small fast things that did not wait.